Hi, how are you all? Oh, there's turkeys in my yard. There's turkeys in my front yard. Oh my god, let me put these books down. Hi. How you doing? Oh my god, is this the end days? Okay. Man, I haven't done a wrap up. It's December 7th, so I haven't done a wrap up since September. So, not that I read a ton of books, but how y'all doing? First, I wanted to say thank you all for hanging out with me and still tuning in with my erratic upload schedule. I had a very stressful deadline this past week that I was working towards, and I just couldn't sit down and edit or film, and that's passed, so hoping I'll be back on track. Thank you all for being here throughout all that. I'm gonna wrap up all the books I read in October and November. I read 11 books in October and November, so that's a lot less than I have been reading monthly. Don't honk at the turkeys. Just let them live their life. So yeah, let's go over all the books I read in October first, because that was definitely more than November. Luckily, I have some great reads during these months, and I had a couple duds, but mostly I had a really good couple reading months. So please grab a drink or a snack and settle down, and let's talk about books. Alright, the first book I read, I was at the library and I really liked the cover, so I was like, and the premise sounded really interesting. That is called A Crooked Tree by Una Menon. This was a very unique and interesting coming-of-age story. It's set in the 1980s in suburban Pennsylvania. It's following our main character, who's 15. Her name's Libby. One night while driving home, Libby's mom, who's a single mom, is really tired. She's really frustrated. There's bickering in the backseat with Libby's siblings, and she just gets really sick of it. And one of Libby's sister pipes up and smart mouth, she's 12, her name's Ellen. She pipes up and just pushes her mom a little too far, so her mom stops the car, tells Ellen to get out and walk the rest of the way home. The sun is going down and she drops her off 5 miles away from home. And the rest of the book follows that one decision and how it affects this ripple effect, and how it affects every single member of this family differently, especially Libby. It almost read like a thriller. I stayed up pretty late one night reading it because I just wanted to know what was going to happen. The suspense was really well done. Main problem I had with this book is there was a fair amount of showing and not telling. And this was really with Libby's father, who you find out has passed away. It's been a few years. Libby holds her dad in such high esteem. She misses him, obviously, but she also wishes he were there, and she gets really frustrated with her mom. And it's she has all these memories with her dad, good memories with her dad. It seems like she's the only one who feels this way about him. Her siblings and even her best friends are he really wasn't that great of a guy. And Libby just shuts it down immediately. She doesn't want to hear the information. But you never find out why they feel that way, because Libby shuts it down so quick. But there's not any exposition about why he was possibly not the greatest dad. The only information you really have on him is he was an Irish immigrant and he lived in a different city to have work, and then he got sick and passed away. But there really wasn't any other information about him as a character, good or bad. So that was kind of annoying. I felt like it was kind of lazy to not really include that. Overall, I really enjoyed it. I do recommend it. I will definitely read from this author again. That was the first book I read in October. The next book. I'm actually really excited to talk about this book. I'm so excited to talk about this book. This was such a massive surprise to me. Such a massive surprise of my reading year, and how much I loved this book. It's so good, and it's so up. And that book is The Shards by very shiny. The Shards by Bret Easton Ellis. I actually like the hardcover. I wanted a paperback, but the hardcover copy, or the cover, is so much better than this, but it's fun. Oh man. How do I even begin to talk about this? I thought this was so well done. So masterful. Bret Easton Ellis is such a talent. In college, I read American Psycho and Lesson Zero, and I remember being really disturbed by Lesson Zero and American Psycho, Cool Your Pants. But I'd also seen the movie, so it was he's a talent. He's a very talented writer. Anyway, The Shards is set in 1981, and it follows high school senior Bret, as in the author, during his final year at Buckley Prep in Beverly Hills. In LA, as a serial killer called the Trawler has been terrorizing the city for the past couple years. And it starts to terrorize Bret and his friend group. There's also a new and mysterious new student called Robert Mallory, who Bret becomes obsessed with for multiple for multiple reasons, but also he thinks he may be the trawler. It's completely fictionalized, like none of this happened. Like the trawler was not a real serial killer, but it feels like it really happened because of how Bret Easton Ellis tells the story. It feels like you're sitting down with him across the table and he's like telling you this story that has traumatized him and that he's carried with him throughout his whole life. It's so vivid and horrifying. I got nauseous in quite a few places, but I couldn't put it down. I could not stop thinking about this book. Like, was this really an awesome book? Or was I just like so enthralled by it because I'm interested in true crime and it reads like it could be a case? But it's not, I don't know, it was just so well done. The information surrounding the trawler felt so real. And there's really horrifying acts of violence, and I do want to highlight like severe trigger warnings for this book on multiple different ways. There's also some violence against animals, but it's not on the page violence, it's the aftermath. Not that that makes it any less horrifying, but I do want to call that out if you're sensitive because it really caught me off guard, and it is like, ooh, it's a lot. This book is very drug and sex fueled, a lot like Less Than Zero or American Psycho. Like that's such a prominent theme in his books, is like young, very well off kids who have way more power and access to drugs and alcohol than they should. And like the glimpse into that lifestyle, I think Bret does so well because he lived it. It made me want to read the rest of his backlog so badly. Like, this was great. 110% recommend if you can stomach it. Oh, I loved it. I'm obsessed with it. It's gonna be one of my favorite books of the year. I'm positive. Unless something knocks it off by the end of the month, this was great. The next book I read, I had in this vlog right here, so I'll go through these pretty quickly. I talk about them more in depth in that vlog if you're interested. The first book I read in that vlog, I think, doesn't matter. One of the books I read in that vlog was The Scourge Between... God, I still can't say that word. The Scourge Between Stars by Ness Brown. This is a sci-fi horror novella following acting captain Jacqueline Albright aboard the ship called the Calypso, who is limping back to Earth after a failed mission to recolonize a distant planet. And there's the constant threat of starvation and going through asteroid fields and taking significant damage, as well as fights breaking out between the crew and people living on the ship that she all has to manage. Then there's a new threat that shows up. One they're not so sure about, that is within the walls of the ship and is picking off crew members one by one. And Jacqueline and the remaining crew in a race to find it and stop it before it kills everyone. I ended up really enjoying this. At first, I was a little unsure because it was a little dry for me. And it was a little slow for a novella, I thought at first. But then it really picked up. And when it picked up, it picked up. The ending, I did not see the ending coming, like, at all. It was like such a gut punch and like so good in like relation to the whole story. I was like, man, wow, I never would have thought of that. Like, that's so good and so vile. It's so good. Bonus points for Ness Brown for doing that because I didn't see it coming, and I'll be interested to see what their full-length work is, if they ever release any, because this was really good. Like, really loved it. I also had it in my, if you like this horror movie, read this book. You want to check out that vlog too. I added this one to it and take a wild guess what that book movie comparison would be. Anyway, really great. The other novella I read in that vlog was Rest Stop by Nat Cassidy, one of my favorite horror authors. He, in my eyes, like, I think he's just such a massive horror talent. I can't wait for his new release next year. But this book, I really liked it. I didn't like it as much as his full-length work, but I still enjoyed it. This follows a young, down on his luck, kind of unassuming musician called Abe, and he is on his way to see his brother and his grandmother in the hospital following what they think is a stroke. Really not that excited to go. They don't really have a great relationship. She's not a very nice person. She's really racist, really awful, but Abe feels guilty and wants to go see her as she was like a big presence in his life growing up. Anyway, Abe stops at a gas station to get some snacks and a drink and go to the bathroom. Once he's done in the bathroom, he tries to open the door. It's locked. Poor Abe then endures one horrifying thing after another on either side of the door. It's so anxiety-inducing. Like, this book is stressful. Such a stressful read. It goes from bad to worse. It's really funny, but it's really gross and gory. Overall, I was just really stressed reading it. I did like it, just not as much as his full-length novels, but this is a really quick, fun read. It still showcases his talent really well at writing horror, so I recommend if you do like Nat Cassidy to pick this up. And then I read this freaky little book called William. Oh, this freaked me out. And this cover is one of the best covers I've seen this year. It's so good. The color palette and like the font, so good. This is set on Halloween following a brilliant engineer called Henry, who is agoraphobic. He hasn't left the house in quite a long time. He spent a lot of time in his attic laboratory working on his new project, which is a fully conscious AI who he names William. Henry's pregnant wife, Lily, is feeling really dejected. She's feeling really sad and kind of has a lot of resentment built towards Henry because he is agoraphobic, which is sad, but they have a baby on the way and she just wants him to be better. In order to help him come out of his shell a little bit, Lily invites former co-workers over to their smart house, like intense smart house, like the smartest of smart houses. She invites them over for dinner. Kind of gets off to a rocky, awkward start, and Henry's attempt to win them over by showing them William. It goes bad so quickly. It goes bad so quickly. It gets so horrifying so quickly, and I could not put this down. I was so freaked out. The twist, props to Mason Coyle, because the ending or the twist I did not see coming at all either. He just did a fantastic job. Like, there's so many freaky elements in this house. Besides William, Henry's also created like toys and like a dog, a robotic dog, and that are just like inside this locked smart house with them. Oh, it's just like one thing after another, and it's just so freaky, and I hate, AI just freaks me out. How about we just not with that? Because fiction taught us nothing about the dangers of giving AI so much power. Like, no one's listening, no one cares. It's like stories like this, it's like, oh yeah, we should care a lot. This was really fun. I really like this a lot. Womp womp. Incidents Around the House by Josh Malerman. This is my least favorite book by him. It's so shiny. Del Rey. Nobody wants a shiny ass book. I definitely don't. I'm probably gonna unhaul this anyway, so like whatever. It's one of the worst books I've read this year. I've kind of gone back and forth on whether or not I should do a worst books of the year because I don't want anyone to be mean to me. But this would be on that list. What do you think? Should I do it? I don't know. I haven't read a ton of bad books this year. There have been quite a few stinkers, so it wouldn't be an overly long video, but I don't know. Let me know. This follows 8-year-old Bella and her parents as they are haunted by this entity who Bella calls Other Mommy. Other Mommy is getting really freaking tired of Bella saying no every time she asks, "Can I go inside your heart?" And so the presence and the haunting and the incidents keep getting ramped up as Bella keeps saying no. First problem I have with this book, I don't think it was a good choice for the book to be solely in an 8-year-old's perspective for almost 400 pages. It was a lot to carry for that much. And I also don't think it needed to be over 400 pages. Like, a lot of it was super repetitive and just boring. Like, I was bored throughout this book. It's just kind of annoying. Bella also didn't read like she was 8 years old. She read more like she was 5 or 4. Honestly, like, I don't know if Josh Malerman's been around a lot of younger kids, or I just didn't think he wrote it very well. I don't think he wrote Bella very well. Like, all I could see was like a 4 or 5-year-old, just how she was written. It was just annoying. Also, the lore or story as to why this was happening to Bella and what Other Mommy was or is was never really fleshed out. I just felt like that was lazy writing, especially for a book. It keeps sliding, especially for a book that's nearly 400 pages. Like, you'd expect like some bigger answer or meaning, and maybe because it was in Bella's perspective she doesn't really understand, but I felt like that was just lazy. I don't think this was scary or well executed. I was really bored. It felt like a PG, a Paranormal Activity, and that's just not for me. So okay, and then I read an incredible book. And I was so unsure at first because it took me a minute to get into the writing style. It blew me away. Like, blew me away. Mind you, this is this author's debut. Mind blown. This is the debut. And that book is Between Two Fires by Christopher Bowman. I read this in October. It's one of the last books I read. Wow. Like, I don't even know where to start with this. This cover is just great. And it says on it, an epic tale of medieval horror. It is. Holy shit. It's like, never has a sentence been truer. Like, epic medieval horror. Holy crap. It's also fantasy too. It's like, it's really well balanced, like historical fiction, horror, and fantasy, but it's mostly horror fantasy. Set in France during the Black Death, which I just want, that's it. I just wanted to read it. This follows a disgraced knight named Thomas, who has found an orphaned girl in a village, alone, where everyone else has died of the plague except her. She tells Thomas that she sees and hears angels, and that she has to get to Avignon in France, which is like hundreds and hundreds of miles away. She has to get there because the Black Death is only a fraction of what will happen to the Earth if it is not stopped, and she is the one to stop it. And Thomas is like, okay, well, I can't just leave her here, and he feels guilty. He decides to at least accompany her part of the way and then make her someone else's problem. He's kind of like a curmudgeon, like really grumpy. The banter between Thomas and the girl, and also there's a priest, there's also like a priest who comes and joins their party too, like this found family aspect. Like their banter was so good. I cared so much for all three of them. So much. This was such an emotional read. Their characters are so fleshed out. And also this has some of the most wild and imaginative horror scenes that I've ever come across. Like all the trigger warnings, like every single trigger warning. This is a tough read, especially in a few places. And like the last I want to say 100 pages of the book, like, so well done. I teared up. It was so beautiful. So horrific, but so beautiful. And the scale of this book and this story was so massive and so well done. I want to read everything Christopher Bullman has ever written because it was so excellent. Oh my god, this would be such an awesome reread. It's so, so good. Yeah, it's really horrific, but it's really great, and I love books like that. This and the Shards were like, damn, like I did not expect to be bowled over by just like reading the barest synopsis of those books. I did not expect them to like hit me as hard as they did. So after that very heavy read, I needed something a little light, so I picked up this YA graphic novel called Mooncakes. This is by Suzanne Walker and it's illustrated by Wendy Xu. It's so cute! Like, do you ever just want to do you ever just want to just like dive in and live and never come out? That's this book. So sweet. It follows a young witch named Nova who spends her days working in her grandmother's bookshop, helping to loan out spell books and investigate supernatural occurrences in their very small town, right? While Nova is investigating the sighting of this strange white wolf in the woods, Nova comes across her childhood best friend, also crush, Tam, who is half werewolf. Tam ends up staying with Nova because she doesn't have anywhere else to go. They try to figure out how to stop this demon that's in the woods that wants to harvest wolf powers for dark reasons. It's so sweet. It's so cozy. It's so queer. I really wanted more. Like, I could have read for like another 1,000 pages. And I don't know if there's gonna be more or if this is a standalone. Regardless, it's like so great and perfect for fall. The cover makes it look like there'd be a lot more baking or like coziness involved. There is coziness, but there's not a lot of baking. There's like a couple scenes with baking. So the cover's a little misleading, but it's still very sweet. I love the illustration style, and the color palette was really pretty. It was like cozy tea and cakes and magic, young love. It was a much needed break for that. Okay, this next one, I guess I'm in my bubonic era. I don't know, because after that I went straight back to another heart-wrenching read set during the Black Plague. That is Hamnet by Maggie O'Farrell. This was my IRL book club read for December. I might get emotional talking about this book. Yeah, fair warning. I haven't talked about this with anyone yet because I haven't had book club yet. I have book club for this next week, so maybe if I get it all now, I won't be emotional during book club. Maybe sorry you're gonna be witness to that. This is set in the 1580s in Warwickshire, following a young woman named Agnes who turns out to be married to a young penniless tutor who wants to be a playwright. And you can only guess what kind of playwright he is. She's very wild and has these unusual gifts. There's a lot of like natural healing. She has a hawk that she trains. So she settles in with her young penniless tutor husband. They end up having 3 children, a daughter, Susanna, and then they have twins, Hamnet and Judith. When the twins are 11, Hamnet dies. And a few years later, her husband releases a play. I thought this was going to be much more Shakespeare, like heavy-handed, like not fanfic, but like heavy-handed, inspired, like following him. It really wasn't. It was mainly following Susanna and the twins, and more of like a portrait of their marriage and this portrait of grief of losing a child. It took me a minute to get into it because the writing is a little dense and there's a lot of indirect conversation that kind of makes you feel like at arm's length, but the passages that are written, like there's a few parts that made me tear up. There's a few parts that made me catch my breath because of how well they explore grief and loss, and I'm tearing up right now. Oh. sorry, battery died right as I was tearing up. So I don't know how much you saw, but I just want to get that out in one take because this is going to be a little painful for me to talk about. The passages that really hit on grief and loss and how to navigate that were so well done. It made me so emotional. It made me like hitch my breath a little bit because it was so powerful. And the line, hold on, I wrote it in my book journal. What is the word Judith asked her mother for someone who was a twin but is no longer a twin? And the reason it hits me so hard, I've never talked about this on my channel. The reason I haven't talked about this is it hasn't come up and I have a lot of trouble talking about this. That one line just like really hit me pretty hard is, I was born a triplet. I haven't talked about this before. I was born a triplet, me and 2 boys. In 2016, one of my brothers got really ill and passed away. And this is gonna sound a little silly, but I still am pretty introverted, but in college, like, or in sometimes with a job, like icebreakers are like, what's an interesting fact that no one knows about you? And I was always say I was a triplet. And when my brother died, I had a really hard time saying that because it's like, it sounds silly, but like when you're a multiple and you lose your other, it's a very unique grief. It's a very hard grief, and I'm really drawn to authors who write grief so well because it is a very different thing for different people, and especially like handling it between these 2 twins, and like this parts of the book between them, the death and afterwards were so gorgeously written and so powerful and like made me so emotional because I've had such a hard time talking about it for the death of my brother for a long time. Yeah, it's like I'm still a triplet. That's not gonna change. That's not gonna change just because he's not here. Like that love doesn't go anywhere. Like that heartache doesn't go anywhere. That grief doesn't go anywhere. The absence of is so wide and so deep. And for when authors capture that, it's such a unique gift. I feel like it's so moving. Like this book is so moving. It does start off a little slow, and once you get into the story and the characters and the writing, it like flies. For me at least, it's just, I can see why this book has so many recognitions and won so many awards because it is so beautifully done. And like the last sentence like bowled me over. I think maybe because I know the play so well and all that happens to him upon writing the play and performing it. It packs so much of a punch at the end, and what a talent. Like seriously, I can see why she spent so long writing this and why she was so fascinated behind the story. Even if it is fictionalized and like there's not that many accounts about this time period, like to take what she had and weave this gorgeous story is like such a talent and a master. I have not read any other Maggie O'Farrell. I definitely want to because this was just breathtakingly gorgeous and moving. Oh boy, I get to talk about this piece of crap now. Alright, this book. I read most recently in my November vlog. I didn't read that much that month. Obviously, I read like 4 books. I was really aching for something post-apocalyptic and wintry. And I kept seeing this book pop up and I was like, oh, it's on. Like, I've had it on my Kindle. Like, let's just read it. Like, I just wanted to read on my Kindle. Voices in the Snow by Darcy Coates. This book. If you've read this book, what time period do you think it's set in? Because my opinion of it shifted so much. Like there's so many things wrong with this book. Like so many issues. It's hard for me to believe that 1, this is a series. There's like 4 books I think, and 2, this is a popular recommendation because I thought it was awful. I didn't like the characters. Like the only thing that kept me going was like the mystery and like the post-apocalyptic aspect. Like that's what I wanted more of. And you're in the dark so much with that. And like I just want to know. So that's what made me kept turning the page. Was like I want to know what the hell's happening. It's more of a romance than it is a post-apocalyptic horror story. And the romance is not well written at all. Like the main character Claire and then Dava. I don't know what. I can't remember. I read it like 2 weeks ago. I can't remember his name. Like they're such flat characters and I couldn't care less about either of them. And like it was just not a good book. It was not a well executed, well written story. It was just a lot of it didn't make any sense. Why is this element in here? And like she was trying to introduce a lot of elements that weren't well fleshed out. I just really didn't like it. I have more about it in this November vlog if you want to hear. Like I kind of go on a tear. Like it's not a good So that's that book. I don't know if I'm gonna read any more Darcy Coates. Everyone says like to read Dead of Winter, and the audiobook is on Spotify, so maybe I'll listen to it, but that left such a nasty taste in my mouth. Like I'm not really interested in this author anymore, even though everyone says that one's so much better. Probably not. Alright, the very last book I have to talk about, which I ended up loving so much, and I'm reading the second book right now. And I did find out, somebody commented and I looked into it, there is going to be a third book, so that's very exciting. Oh god, and that book is Interview with, oh my god, I did it again! I keep want to call this Interview with the Vampire. It's Empire of the Vampire. It's very similar in the structure to Interview with a Vampire, but there's a lot more going on. This is a wild ass book. This is a vampire fantasy horror following our main character Gabrielle de Leon, who is the last Silver Saint in this world, which is dominated by vampires since this event happened 3 decades earlier called Day's Death, where there isn't really a sun anymore in the world. The land is kind of coated in like this half-light where there's not really sun, and vampires are running rampant, and Silver Saints are tasked with defending the church and this land against them. It's basically, at the beginning of the book, he is captured by a vampire queen, and there's a historian who wants to know his story. He's the last Silver Saint, and the queen would like to know his beginnings up until he was captured. So he's basically telling his entire story. A lot of time jumps. It's such a complex, layered story, but that doesn't mean it's a hard read. I actually thought it was like really well done and easy to read. And the lore with all the vampires that J. Kristoff built was so cool. There's different bloodlines that have different powers. This really reminded me of Bloodborne and Castlevania, and the illustrations are by Bon Orthwick, who is also illustrating the second book. They are absolutely gorgeous, gorgeous illustrations. Oh my god, like they're so pretty. And there's not, like I said in my vlog, there's not just like a handful. There's a ton of artwork. There's so much artwork, and it's all so good. Man, I just love this story. I loved all the characters. Sorry, this is following like a big part of the story. There may be a way to end Day's Death and defeat vampires, and that is by finding the Holy Grail. This one person who's like, there's this ragtag group of people who surround them. This one person who's like a very well-trained young thief called Dior. Gabrielle, as well as this group, believes that they are the key to ending Day's death because they know where the Grail is. And their banter, I loved Gabriel's banter. Like, he's such an asshole, but he's so funny too. Like, there's a lot of humor in this book, which I really appreciated. And like the banter's so well done, and like the cast, I loved all the characters, even the bad ones. Like, they're so well written. This is really good. Like, I'm so glad I finally picked this up. I've seen this everywhere. I really wanted to read it, and now I'm reading the second one, so I could not recommend it enough. It is very epic vampire fantasy. Really good. All right, and that's all the books I read. It's not that much, but honestly, like, I've been so busy with work and other things and just doing other things and just haven't wanted to sit down and read. I don't know if I'll do a December wrap up. I'm reading quite a few books right now, but I don't know. I may do one. I don't know if I'm going to finish them all before the end of the year, so I might just do my best books of the year instead. I don't know. We'll see. I don't know. Again, it might be like a 10-minute long video if I do, because I don't know how many books I'm going to finish, but it's almost the end of the year. It's wild. I've read almost 100 books, which is crazy. A lot of them were short, though. It takes me a lot longer to read bigger books. Like, Empire of the Vampire took me most of the month of November to read. But, well, there's a lot of other things going on, but like I take my time with much bigger books usually. That's all I want to read right now is just big chonky fantasy books. I hope you all are doing well. Have you read any of the books that I mentioned below? Which one are you interested in the most? Do you have any books you really want to get to before the end of the year? Let me know down below, and while you're down there, go ahead and hit like if you enjoyed the video, and subscribe if you haven't already. I really appreciate the support. It means the world to me. There's almost 5,000 of you. Where have you all come from? I'm so glad you're here. As always, thank you so much for clicking. Thank you so much for watching, and I'll have a new video for you soon. Bye! Bye.